All right, we're back. We are COMP305. That's Game Programming 1 at Centennial in the fall 2017 semester. And we are week 2, part 1 of our broadcast. And we're talking about game pitches today because next week we are going to do our game pitch as well as your game design document, right? So last week, what I asked you guys to do is put together your contracts. That was week 1, right? So some of you didn't hand it in. I don't know why, but some of your groups, I guess, either forgot to or did ever. So please check to see if your group has handed in your contract. That is worth 5% of your final grade, which is crazy that if you guys didn't hand that in, right? So please check that out. So we're talking about, this is the order of what we're doing, right? So again, next week is game pitches. The week after that is your game design document in second version format, or 2 weeks after that, I mean. And then, like, again, if you look at the schedule, each one of these things has a weighting to it, right? So your game pitch is worth 5% of your final grade, game design document version 2, probably another 5%, and so on, right? And again, I will share when I have this, when we do the game pitch part, there will be an assignment up on eCentennial with all the details. So what's some of the same stuff that I've got in here in this document, which I've already posted up on eCentennial for you, right? So this document is up on eCentennial. I'm just going over this whole thing with you again. All right, so that's what we'll do next week. And in order for us to prepare, I've borrowed a presentation from a group of students at UIT that kind of put this together in their GDW, which is their game design workshop, which is kind of cool. They're good with this, but what they do is whenever we do game pitches, pitches are pitches. We want to try and talk about our game, and this is the stuff that they really talked about. So, they want to kind of talk about what's your game about. Right, so they've kind of put some screenshots here of their favorite games, and that's really what when you do your pitches, you want to talk about, hey, this is my game, this is what's not my game. You want to talk about your inspiration. So if you notice on your presentation, what I asked you guys to do is, tell me what your inspiration is for your game. Like, what is it? You need to be able to describe it in terms of something you either know very well, or that you've played before, right? That you really like. Now remember, there's certain limitations we've given you. Wallace and I have kind of put up these limitations saying there's 3 types of games, kind of categories of games, but it doesn't mean you're going to make the exact same game, right, as everybody else. That's not the case, or may not be the case, because not every platformer is the same. Not every shooter game is the same. Not every tank kind of game is the same. So you have a lot of variation in terms of the what you're able to make. But we always talk about a few things when it comes to the game itself, when you talk about your game. And some people don't, their idea, when you're in a group, sometimes you're working on different games. Let me explain that. Like, one person, the game designer, has an idea, a vision, and then your programmer has something totally different in mind. And your artist has something else totally different in mind. And so that your game comes out kind of really weird, right? So here's the highlights of what we talked about. There's kind of like 3 things you should think about. Think about your, I don't know why this is not showing up, because it should be, it's just not showing up. Think about your mechanics, your dynamics, and your aesthetics. Those are the 3 things. This idea of MDA instead of DNA, right? The DNA of your game should have these 3 things: your mechanics, your dynamics, and your aesthetics. And this is what these guys talked about, which I really enjoyed in their little conference that they gave. So mechanics for me, rules of the game, that makes sense. Dynamics, how the players use the rules, right? And then aesthetics, the experience the players have. So example of mechanics in Pac-Man, moving, collecting pellets, eating ghosts. Dynamics, maneuvering around ghosts, finding safe paths. So how the players will deal with it. What's their strategy, right? So you have to kind of think about as well. And of course, the aesthetics are, they talked about the challenge, the power of being the Pac-Man, anticipation, all that kind of stuff, as well as how it looks. This is kind of a retro game, right? So it has this retro feel to it, right? So the look and feel of the game is really important as well. I'm going to share this PowerPoint presentation with you guys up on eCentennial later on. I kind of finished it off a little bit more. So I thought that was a really good thing when they talked about this thing. They talked about these 3 things: mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics. And I think for what I'm looking for, and I think from what Wallace is looking for, focus on your mechanic in the beginning, okay? But when you start thinking about your GDD, you got to look at the other 2 as well: your dynamics and your aesthetics, because in the game design document, you want to kind of put together a wireframe. You want to put together these other things that kind of show off your level, and kind of think to yourself what features you're going to have in your game, what you're not going to have in your game, and so on. And we'll talk about that. Now, these guys give a couple of additional examples. So they talked about mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics for, kind of a Street Fighter game, right? Different kinds of things. So Street Fighter is different. Is it a platformer? In this particular case, no. It's kind of a platform-like game where you can move, crouch, jump, and so on. Different kind of game than what we're making, right? But again, you can see that there's different these different things. Here's another one. And I like it. I like the fact that you can analyze. So think about your game. Think about what your game's mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics are going to be when you pitch, okay? So what are they? And I think I want you to talk about them a little bit when you're talking about your game next week, okay? Okay, what are you going to pitch? You're going to be talking about game mechanics because in your game design document, you're going to need to talk about that. Some kind of user interface, what kind of art that you're going to have, sound and music, your story, if there's any kind of story. Some games don't have a story, and the games you might be making most likely may not have a story unless you're doing some kind of platforming game. I can think of a story there. Your tank game, if you want to kind of think about a story that's a narrative that made these two tanks or why they're fighting, like the whole reason why, and all that kind of stuff. So you can talk about these kinds of elements inside of your game. Is that a hand or are you just stretching? Okay. So here's an example of some games that, so what are the game mechanics? What are the user interface for this game as an example? And they've given some other examples here. I'm sure you guys can figure out some games that make sense for you. Now, these are definitely not my type of games, right? But I'm more of a first-person shooter. I like Destiny. I'm more of a Fallout guy. I like those kind of games from Bethesda. I also do strategy games, and that kind of thing. But whenever I think of any game, you can apply some of these basic things to the pitch. What are my game mechanics? How do I do? What does my user interface look like? Do I have scoring? How do I take care of my health system? All that kind of stuff. How does the art kind of collide with my aesthetic, create my aesthetics and so on? I think these are good things to think about when you're pitching, right? Now remember, your pitch can only be about 10 minutes. Like here's a puzzle game. So Portal, and this is not a bad game. I played when I was I played this with my son recently actually, just because we picked out an old game from the Xbox 360 and we said let's play Portal 2, right? But so any kind of game, there's got to be these things, and it has to match. So the aesthetics kind of have to match the idea, the vision of the game. So your designer, think about your designer. Remember I talked about goals and also the roles of each of the members of your team. So everyone has a different role, right? But that's their prime. It doesn't mean that you're not going to program or that you're not going to think about how to put things together. It's just, something that you're going to focus on compared to everybody else. Because if we start all doing the same things, the game will never get done, right? Now, this is a different approach we're taking this semester in Game Programming 1 and in Web Game Programming, the next one after this one, because normally, like I said last week, we'd give this stuff to you like in the second half of the semester after we did a bunch of Unity and other things. And the Unity is just a tool, right? It doesn't matter. This stuff will apply to your game design for Unity, for Unreal, for your game projects in OpenGL, whatever it's going to be if you're someone who's a game programmer, right? For those people who aren't game programmers, who are in the software engineering side, that's okay too, because this gives you an idea of what to build and how to build it, right? I don't want you guys to build a new game kind of in a vacuum. Like, thinking of if you've never played a game before, that's also very hard, right? There's been some people that I've had in Game Programming 1 and in Web Game Design who've never, ever played a game. They're not gamers, but somehow they took the course because it's an elective, right? That makes it really hard, right? Like if you don't play games, how the hell can you make games, right? If I'm a writer, I want to be a writer, right? I want to read. If I've never read a book, how can I write a book, right? So it's kind of really weird, right? So part of the homework that I have to give you today is play some games, guys. Like not in class, I'm saying, but you got to play some games, right? Because if you haven't played any games, especially the game that you want to make, if you want to make a certain type of game, play that kind of game, right? Because otherwise, how can you as a design, from a design perspective, how can you, kind of think about the rules of what your game is going to be like compared to another game, right? So that's kind of part of it. There's this idea of an elevator pitch. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that. The famous one is the one with the Disney exec and Square Enix. I mean, to me, it's, they have this conversation. It's like, for me, it's like a 30-second conversation that you're going to have with somebody about your game. And this idea in your mind really moves forward to the one-liner, right? The idea of, hey, what's my game about, right? So I want to talk about my game in like one line. My game is like Mario with grappling hooks. That's one line. You can kind of picture in your head, right? That what the kind of game is. So think about this when you put together your document. I'm going to go back to my document in a second for your game pitch. Think about, how can you explain your game quickly? Remember, because you're only going to have 10 minutes max to explain the whole game, go through your document, and there's no demo yet, but you're pitching it. And if it's way out of whack, I'm going to go, no, you need to change this. I don't recommend this. You're going to get some feedback from everyone else in the room as well. Hopefully everyone will give positive feedback next week, right? I don't want any kind of things like that sucks. That idea is terrible, right? I don't want that. Like, yeah, you know what? Maybe it can't work because you don't have enough time. That makes more sense, right? Than saying something really negative to your classmates. Okay, so 1 or 2 sentences. So depending on the type of game, if it's a player versus player game, what kind of, then you talk about it. It's my game is a player versus player game, or players versus the game, or is it, players, player versus player, or is it a team type game? You start off with that. Think about those kind of things, right? My game is about capturing and destroying. It's a territorial control. It is resource, kind of mining and that kind of stuff. So talk about those things, the mechanics of your game a little bit as well, right? And you can see that there are other things. A bullet hell game, it's a rail shooter. That here's an interesting thing: rail shooter where players must snap pictures of the Pokemon, right? Pokemon Snap, and a bunch of other ones that you can think of, right? Metroid Prime, that was a pretty good game. So just, those kind of things. Here's one that they kind of came up with. That's the one-liner that kind of describes Metroid Prime, a first-person shooter heavily weighted on exploration and item collection, following a bounty hunter who must track down an alien threat on a mysterious planet. I think that's a really good one-liner that describes the game, right? So think about your one-liner. If you're going to say what my game is about, and you can say something like, it's like this, but it's this, that's fine too. You can also describe your game in terms of other games. So think about those kinds of things when you put together your pitch next week. How about, I got nothing. Like, this is interesting. When the students put this up and they said, but I got nothing, right? And the reason why they said this is because sometimes, it's week 3 and we really haven't talked about technology. We're just learning Unity as an example, and you have nothing to show, right? But that's not really true, because your art person, whoever you've assigned as the artist, should come up with some concept sketches, grab some inspirational stuff from other games. Like, all that stuff should be the things that you're going to put on your PowerPoint presentation. Organizing yourself is really, really important when you're doing a pitch, and we're going to talk about that in a second when we go back to that project document. There will be certain slides that I'm going to ask you to put together. Okay. So there is no, I got nothing. You get talk about the mechanics, talk about all these things. You may not have anything to show in terms of, my game doesn't function right now. I don't have a game. You're pitching your concept. You're pitching your vision. Okay. And they get some interesting other kinds of games. They're talking about inspirations here in terms of the kind of game they're making, which is kind of neat. Scope is also a big problem. One of the things you're going to be pitching next week is, what you're going to include in your game and what you're not going to include in your game, right? So you can see that there's 2 different kind of scopes here, right? What was that? Yeah, which is kind of, if you look at this kind of stuff, right? One on the left-hand side looks like it's really simple. It looks really simple. On the right, it's insane, right? So scope is bad on both sides, right? If you have a really stupidly simple game that you're going to put together, I'm going to say no, right? Because it has to adhere to the things I've asked you to put together, right? And if it's something that's insane, I want to make a role-playing game that's a AAA title within 10 weeks and with Unity. No, not going to happen, right? And that's why we're not doing role-playing games. That's why we're not allowed. There's only certain things I'm allowing to do. There's constraints for you guys, not because I want to limit your creativity necessarily, neither does Wallace, but in that we want to get your stuff done in the time we have, right? So that's why talk about the things that you're going to be doing in your game. Think about features that you can possibly pull off in the time that you have. And then we'll talk about how complex those features are. I'll give you feedback. Like you say, as an example, I want to make my grappling hook work. Grappling hook is really hard, a really hard mechanic, believe it or not. Because if you think about it, if I'm really casting a grappling hook, I got to show the grappling hook, right? It's got to grapple somehow, connect to whatever platform I'm doing. I've got to show the swinging idea. So there's got to be some kind of physics you're using. So you have to use the physics engine that's built into Unity, right? And then the grappling hook is going to have to either retreat, come back into wherever the person, I don't know, the crossbow that they're using, if it's a crossbow or some other kind of thing, or if they swing it. Imagine the character swinging the grappling hook and you're showing that in 2D. Oh yeah, lots of fun. So I mean, you can make it as complex as you like, or as simple as you like, but the mechanic that you want to focus on is the main mechanic that you're going to show off on when you do your alpha, whatever that is going to be, right? And that's like further down the line. That's like way down, but think about what that neat mechanic is going to be and how you're going to do it. How are you going to accomplish that? If it's out of whack, like I want to do Fog of War in my game. Fog of War, let's think about this. I'm going to do Fog of War in my game in a 2D kind of platformer, and I have a flashlight. And when my flashlight hits, the fog, the fog goes away. That's my mechanic, right? How doable is that? Can you do it? Maybe, huh?
So usually when you flash the fog, it gets really blurry.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's really dark. You're in a cave and it's all darkness, and your flashlight takes the darkness away. And when you see it, when you flash your flashlight somewhere else, and this is in 2D, by the way. That's even another weird thing, right? You got to figure out how this does. So you brainstorm what your mechanic is going to be, because you're going to have some kind of interesting, different mechanic than, let's say, right, like the grappling hook mechanic, right, that we talked about, which is really hard. So this is the recap. So again, they say these guys, they would always pitch about 5 to 7 minutes because there is no demo. Typically in a demo, you do your pitch. Every time you do your alpha, beta, final presentation or whatever, it's a pitch, right? You're pitching your game again and again and again. You're trying to say, here's what it is. And so this class and web game programming, that's COMP397, the other class, is going to make you build up your skills in terms of two things. So it's not just Unity skills, but it's also building up your skills. So when you go to a game jam, if you go to Level Up or whatever, and hopefully all of you should go with your team in April, is really talking about this stuff, right? It's really talking about how do I put stuff together, and everything else, right? Now these guys have aligned assignments because it's GDW. We don't have that, so we have your assignments are aligned in this class only, but in other places they have this kind of project they do, and they align them with other projects. But one of the things that I want you to think about is they already talked about the elevator pitches is cutting the fat out of your presentations. So try and pare down your presentation. One thing I don't want in your presentation is tons of words. Don't give me a story, right? No one's going to read it anyway, right? Be visual. I think that's the thing for me. It's visual language. A game is visual language. Okay, I should get an idea of what's happening visually. So make sure your slides are succinct and short. Don't make them so that they're tons of text and no graphics, right? That's the one thing. Put up people up here who are going to, I don't care for everyone to pitch your game, okay? I don't want everyone up here pitching your game. I want you to pick 2 people max out of your team who really know how to present well, okay, and who are going to do that. If you want to practice presenting, and that's not part of your skill set right now, that's okay. You can come up here and try it out. But if you have problems with the language, if you have problems putting things together and you still want to do it, make sure you write it all out. Like have little cue cards in your hand that you're going to talk to, okay? Presentation is not about adding lib here, all right? You're not going to come up here and somehow figure out what to talk about randomly. Presentation ahead of time for next week, right? So when you come up with your presentation, right, practice it. Sit there and think to yourself, okay, how is this going to go over? Is it going to be good? Now, if I'm up here, think about this. I'm up here and I've never done my presentation before, and I'm talking about something. I got to face this way because of the microphone. I'm talking about something that I have no idea what I'm saying. I've never even seen these slides before, right? I'm not going to do well. It doesn't matter how good you are, right? You need to look at the slides. You need to practice. You need to have some cue cards. I recommend go over it with your team. Pick the best people to do the presentation. That's for sure. This is not a business presentation. That's the other thing I want to tell you, right? So even though I'm going to frame it in a PowerPoint for you guys, say, hey, you need to have some kind of slides or something. It's not a business presentation. It's a game presentation, right? If you're not interested about the game, you don't want to do this game, then don't make the presentation, right? You got to love this game. This game is like the best game you've ever made in your life. It's better than everyone else's game, even if it's going to suck, okay? And I'm telling you this because if you really are dry when you're up here, you're going to be really dry when you go out and do a pitch somewhere else, right? And by the way, this doesn't matter if it's if you're pitching a game, a new application you're going to do with mobile devices, right? You got to be interesting to listen to. If you're boring as hell, right? I'm not going to listen to you. If your presentation sucks and it's really bland, no color, no video, nothing, right? I'm not going to listen to you. That's just human nature, right? Look, we have very little patience, right? Look, we go to a movie nowadays, and if it doesn't really interest us, some people fall asleep in movie theaters, right? Even with the loud sounds and everything else, they fall asleep. Or you watch an episode of your favorite show, right? And you have to pause it a bunch of times. You get popcorn, get some drinks, go to, whatever, go to the washroom, eat, make a phone call. You do all kinds of stuff when you watch. People do this stuff when they watch shows. They can't concentrate on a show for an hour, right? And it might be their favorite show. It might be their favorite genre. They might be watching Game of Thrones, and they pause it, because they can't concentrate for more than a few minutes. So that's why it's got to be short, 5 to 7 minutes, and it's going to be to the point, no fat, so no lots of words. I don't want to see panels of words. I'm telling you in advance, right? What else can I say that I think I've captured most of it, but like I said, if you're going to have, the other thing is if you're going to have two people up here, let's say, for example, you and I are up here, come on, right? So let's suppose both of us are presenting, right? I need to know when I'm going to switch to him, and he's going to know when he's going to switch back to me. It's not going to be like, okay, go ahead now. Okay, go ahead now. Okay, go ahead now, right? Huh?
He's going to take off his hat.
Like cute, whatever it is, you gotta time this stuff. It's like, thank you. It's gotta be like we're in drama class a little bit, all right? For people who've ever taken drama class, we're on the stage, people are watching you, right? And some of it is the fear of being up here. You've never spoken in front of other people before. You're afraid about it. You're kind of weird. You've never done it before. Maybe you're kind of concerned about your language or something you're going to say wrong. Write it out. Write it out. Prepare what you're going to say ahead of time, right? If you're going to be the one presenting. Okay. And, and make sure you practice with your partner. If there's two people up here, and I'm asking for at least two people to be up here, right? For your alpha presentation, there's going to be 3 people. Okay. Think of it this way. 2 people presenting like before, but they're going to talk to each other because it's more interesting to have a kind of dialogue with 2 people. And 1 person actually controlling your slides, and maybe the game, because there's going to be a game demo at some point. We don't have nothing. There's no game demo yet, but there will be, right? So I'm game demoing. That's what I'm doing here, right? So next week's an important week for you because you're going to be talking about your concept, and then we're going to vet it together as a team. We're going to look at it as a class and go, guys, no one is going to can escape feedback. I want discussions from everybody. I'm going to go around the room, and I'm going to say, for example, Winston, tell me what you think about this game, as an example. And then Winston's going to say, he's not going to say it sucks. Hopefully, he's going to say, you know what, I just don't think it's realistic, or I think that this feature particularly we can probably leave. I would recommend you leave that out, or you know what, I think the aesthetic you're describing might be really difficult to capture over this period of time. Something that's more realistic and constructive than it sucks or I like it. Both of those 2 things suck. Okay, if I say it's really bad and I like it, tell me more. It doesn't. If you and I go to a gallery, an art gallery, and I look at a painting and I go, I like it. What do I like about it? Do I like the way it captures my feelings? Do I like what is it do I like about it? And that's what I want you to talk about. I want you to say, I like it because of this. I think it's a good concept. I think it's, I think it's doable, those kind of things. Or I don't think it's doable. I think it's out of scope. I think you guys should reduce it. Give these people feedback because they need to hear it from you guys and they need to hear it from me. All right, whoever it's going to be that's presenting, and be gentle. Okay. In other words, just don't say, you suck. It's not, but the other thing is, it's not about you, okay? So when you pitch a concept, don't take it personally. That's the other thing I want to talk about. If people give you feedback and it's not what you're looking for, if you think it's the best game ever and somehow they're like, well, it's not the best game ever. It's a concept. Don't tie yourself to your artwork or to your programming, okay? Because once you start tying yourself to it, it's personal, it's mine, right? I write a pitch, I write a one-liner, and it's not exactly perfect. And someone goes, well, they comment about your one-liner. And then you're defending it. You're like, no, this is perfect. This is exactly what it should be. Don't defend it. Just take the feedback in. Remember, feedback is like advice. It's free, right? It's free. You can take it or leave it. You don't have to take the advice, right? Once you start taking it personally and taking, making it so that it's a personal attack, it's a negative. Okay, any questions around the idea of pitching a little bit? Let's go back to that little document. So again, I'm going to put the details up, but if you look at the PowerPoint presentation that we put up as, the PDF as a general guide, right? I will be putting up an assignment, right? But if you look at the details, right, for the the game pitch, right, which is worth 5%, there are some minimum slides you need. A title slide, a planning slide. So what is this game like? That kind of stuff. What are the games that you play that have influenced the game that you're making, that kind of thing. Review, that one-liner. My game is like blah, 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 and it's like this, and it does this mechanic, right? That kind of thing. A one-liner, right? Talk about your mechanics, dynamics, and aesthetics that you're going to capture in your game. Those three things. Your DNA of your game. They call it the MDA, right? But it's really the DNA for me, right? So define your game more closely with the main mechanic. Talk about the roles. I want to see your pictures. I want to see like who's part of your team and what are they doing, right? That kind of thing. That should be something that you're going to be putting up on a slide, right? And then talk about how are you going to be successful, right? So talk about your plan, like your actual, your plan for the next bunch of weeks. How are you going to do things? When are you going to meet? Talk about those kind of things, right? What have you gotten to? If you've done any concept art, include that stuff in here if you can, right? And anything else, these are the minimum slides, right, that I'd like you to put in. Again, minimal words. I don't want walls of text, okay, for your stuff. I want you to get rid of that idea, right? If you're going to include points, I want maximum 3 or 4 points per slide, right? 3 or 4 bullet points, like we're talking about per slide. Once you include like a wall like this, imagine this was my slide. If I made a slide out of this PDF, right, I would probably break it up into a couple of slides. I would take the first 3 points, title slide, planning, and game overview, and put it into the slide. Then I would take the last 3 points, game definition, roles, and preparation, and maybe put that into another slide. And if game definition was really big, I might give that its own slide, right? I don't want to clutter my stuff with too much with too many words and not enough graphics. Remember, this is a visual medium. Okay, so this is what's going to be due. 5% of your final grade. It will include your team logo. With this also comes the game design document, right? The game design document, this first version of your game design document, V1, right? I've given you a template, and I'm sure you've seen it for people who've been in Wallace's class before. It's the same game template that we share around Wallace's class, right? Which is this just general. Actually, I got this years ago, I think in 2010 or even earlier than that, right? Although someone changed it to 2012 on the document if you look at it, right? From Microsoft, actually. Microsoft actually came up with some kind of idea of a game document, game design document, a GDD, and what we've been doing is been using it as a template, just in general, just to put some stuff down. Do I want every part of your game design document? Let's take a look at this. Here's the example game design document that we've given you. Now, Wallace might have a different thing that he wants you to do, but this is also due. are you going to be presenting this? No, you're going to be handing this thing in. Okay. So here's what I want. If you haven't figured it out, or if you had, you chose a company name is the group name. Okay. So whatever that game is, like for example, I don't know, people came up with names, Power of Three, whatever, because there's three of you. I don't know, one of those kind of weird names. Make a company logo like I talked about last week, right? So don't just, do a game pitch without an identity. Really cool logos nowadays. This kind of describe what the company's about a little bit. And we're going to be talking about some asset software. We see some things that we can design assets with today, right? And that's the same stuff that you can use to create logos with. So you need to make something to do with your game assets, right? Now, it does not, your company logo may have nothing to do with your game. It's just your company logo to identify who you are. If you're going to do more game courses or even other courses with me that have project-related stuff, you're going to need a logo. All right. Any course that I do, I'm asking you for your logo when you do group work. Why? Because I think it's really, really super important for you to identify yourself. I can look at your team. It's like your signet ring, right? Signet ring. It's going to stamp the wax. That's you. This is your signet ring, your company logo. The document title should be the game title, whatever it is, and any subtitle you want to put in there if it's careful. Notice there's these square brackets. I expect that you remove them. Okay. Square brackets mean change the stuff that's in here. Sorry about this. Change the stuff that's in here. Don't leave the document title, document title. All right. That's not the name of the game. I will not accept your game called The Document. The game that you make. There's some kind of weird, you're capturing the document or whatever. I don't know. Version would be, again, in this particular case, I'm talking about the version of your document. So this would be version 1. Okay. And obviously you want to change 2012, by to the 2017 by, and this is your company. You replace whatever games with your company, all rights reserved. And for the authors, put your team here, names of your authors here, right in here in this first page. Now, this is a template. And if you notice, it's all white. Your game company that you're making should have some kind of colors associated with it and marketing materials in the end, right? We're also talking about the business of making games here a little bit, right? So, and I'm talking about very little bit. We don't have a lot of time. But if you think about this, make this your own. It doesn't have to be white. Make it another color, something that matches your business colors or the colors of your company, the colors of your game, right? It could also mean you might have to put other things in here, other graphics that make sense, okay? Although I don't want a gaudy document. It doesn't have to be like crazy. May 16th, 2012. That's so funny. Yes?
Like kind of like a London.
Something like, or you may have some kind of, like I know other people have this idea of a game and they have the same kind of style that they use for their PowerPoint presentations. They also put on these documents. Everything should match. Your PowerPoint presentations, your game design document, all that kind of stuff should be in line with your philosophy in terms of the way you do your games, your style, all that kind of stuff, your colors. If you should try and do that. Remember, this is a first draft. So if you can't pull it off for your first draft next week, it's okay to do it for the second draft. Okay. But I want to see this game design document, your own. If I don't see that, you'll lose marks. Okay. I'm just telling you in advance. If you just leave it as a template, not good. Okay. Table of contents. It says hyperlinked. I expect that to happen. All right. So that means that you make a table of contents is a kind of an idea for the reader to say, here's all the stuff that this person's included or this group is included in this document. So it's easy for me to find, right? Version history. This is where your GitHub stuff goes, right? So I don't want you necessarily to just get a screen cap of your GitHub commits. That's not what I want here. Only you could do that if you want. But it must have at least your GitHub link, okay? So put your GitHub link in here, a minimum, right? A link to your GitHub repository. All right, this is in the version history. And then, and by the way, notice that the title of the document must change on every page. Please don't leave it like this, right? Okay, now this part is I expect lots of changes in this side, okay? So here's part. This is the body of your video game design document. Take this whole thing out. This is just explanation, okay? Don't leave it in. I've seen this left in a game design document. It's ridiculous, guys. Don't do this kind of stuff. This is explanation. This is description. This is instructions for you in square brackets, okay? Your game overview. Ensure you mention the goal of your game and how to win if applicable. Or, what would I put in here? The one-liner, your log line. If this was a movie, if your game was a movie, you put your log line in a world that blah, 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 whatever. Like, like your game trailer almost kind of thing. Right? Put that line in there. What's your game overview about? And then talk about a little bit of your game. So maybe that one-liner and then a little bit of a description. It's like this. What kind of gameplay mechanics? So the same stuff that you're going to show in your pitch, you're going to put in here. You're going to describe in more detail, right? Here is the opposite of your game pitch. In your game pitch, your presentation, I'm looking for very little words. Here, I'm looking for detailed descriptions. Okay, so if you're going to put your detailed descriptions, they're going to be in your GDD, your game design document, not in your PowerPoint presentation, okay? What kind of camera are you going to have? Most likely, it's going to be a orthographic type of camera because you're doing, a 2D game, right? You could also decide if you really wanted to leave this out because in this particular case, you're not going to have a special camera. You're not going to move the camera around. Chances are those kind of things. How are you going to play? Is it going to just be a WASD and the mouse? Is that what you're going to do? Your mouse and keyboard? Or are you going to include some kind of, you can see how old this is because it says joystick, game controller? Is it going to be some kind of game controller that you're going to include? And you can do that with Unity, right? You can grab an Xbox 360 game controller, especially if you're doing like a player versus player game. You can have two of them and hook it up to your machine, right? And it can identify that you're using a controller to control your avatar as opposed to, or player, as opposed to mouse and keyboard. Do you have saving and loading? I recommend not. In this particular course, I don't think it's necessary for you to save and load your game, only because there's some additional things you need to do here. How are you going to do that is another whole aspect of this. Could take another month or so to do this right, is what I'm saying. And I don't think we have time for this. So I would recommend leaving saving and loading out unless you're really ambitious and you have a really talented team, right? Interface sketch. This is really important. It talks about not just the game interface, but I also want screenshots, and I think this is one part I've left out of here, which is I want you to put in screenshots of your levels, right? So if you have them, if you have screenshots of your levels, you put them in your up here. But let's suppose I have I want to sketch out my level. I think you should sketch it out. So have your artist or whatever to do a side view or a top-down view or whatever of what your general level is going to look like. Guys, it doesn't have to be colored. It just has to be literally like a line sketch with some labels. This is my player. This is where the bad guys come from. This is the bullets that I shoot out. This is the, like that kind of stuff. So understand how the game flows. Like, you got to think about what your interface sketch is going to look like. When you have screenshots in version 2 of your game, when you have something to show, and in version 3 and 4 and 5 of your document, this is a living document. You're going to continue to update this document. And in your menu and screen descriptions, you're going to show your menus. You're going to show your screenshots for your different levels. You're going to show your start screen, your gameplay screen, and your end screen, all those screens that are going to be required in your game. Okay? So that's the stuff you're going to do here. For now, this can stay idle. You can say, more detail coming or whatever, because you have nothing to put here yet, right? But you will have something there later. What is your game world like, right? If you're doing some kind of top-down tank game, as an example, or a space shooter type game, or some other kind of shooter game, bullet hell as a good example. What does your game world look like? If you're doing a bullet hell, remember one of the requirements is that you're going to be moving from one environment to another environment to the third environment. That was one of the requirements in your game, if you look at it, right? Describe your levels, each of your game levels. The first level should always be, for the most part, a tutorialized level to show the people. It should be very short compared to the other levels and easier, right? So you get your player into the game a little bit, let them play, right? Just for the first part, so he understands how to win the game. How do I collect loot? How do I defeat the baddies in the game? How do I level up if I'm going to level up? How do I do all those things? That's probably in the first level or so. You should try and show them how to do that, right? And from a game progression perspective, you want to show if there's different levels. Levels and game progression kind of are tied together in that levels kind of show off what your levels are going to look like, and the game progression that kind of describes how the player will progress in the game, right? And how it might get a little bit harder, or describe that the boss is going to be on the 3rd level, as an example, and he's a multi-stage boss. What kind of characters do they have? Your avatar, your enemies. Do you have non-player characters, which is right here? For example, if you're playing, I'm going back to the shooter game. I'm thinking about 1492. You know, as an example, that old retro game. You have your plane, and then you have. And by the way, we're going to do a clone of 1492 in this class today. We're going to start that off, right? And what's going to happen is you're going to see that there's going to be you get a non-player character if you win. If you defeat some bosses or whatever, or some part of the screen, you get a non-player character, a pickup. It could be a pickup, and then the non-player character just kind of slides along with you and fires as well, right? And it can be that simple. Describe your enemies. Describe your weapons, if any. Remember, you don't have to make, even though it says weapons here on the GDD. What if, just put it out there, your game does not include weapons? Can your game do that? Yes, right? Your game doesn't have to be, even though it's a tank game, it could be some other game where your tank actually shoots out, here's the mechanic for a tank game, shoots out a net, and that's the other guy, right? I'm just saying, it could be a way that maybe your tank is more like Empire Strikes Back. So, you know, where your tank has to encircle another tank and then, you know, wrap it up with some kind of other thing, you know, I don't know. Something else it could be that include not necessarily a weapon. Maybe your game, if you're a platformer game, there are no weapons. It's just you. It's like you getting through the level without getting killed, right? So you have your grappling hook, but you're not killing anybody, right? So you may not have weapons in the game. You might be avoiding obstacles or traps or whatever, right? Any kind of items that are going to help you or hinder the player. Abilities, vehicles. You can see how this goes. So there might be some sections here that don't, cheat codes. They don't really make sense for your game. What if your game doesn't include cheat codes, or doesn't include bonuses, or doesn't include a puzzle or mini game? Take this section out. Only include sections of this in your game design document that are pertaining to your game. Okay, so don't leave them blank. Don't sit there and go, you know what? I don't have any puzzles or mini games, so section XX, I'm just going to leave blank. No, take it out, right? Because it doesn't make sense for your game. This is a template. It's not everything here is required. All right, same thing with your story index. One thing I do want is your art multimedia index to be included here. So think about adding in some kind of table. And inside this table, you want to kind of say, okay, well, here's my player. This is where I got my player from. I made my player graphic. I modified my player graphic from Open Game Art. How did you get your player graphic? Right? That kind of stuff. You want to kind of include that in your art multimedia index, right? So guys, this stuff is all due next week, right? This is not something that is like going to be due in 3 weeks or 4 weeks. This is your first draft of this document, and your pitch for next week is due next week, right? It's coming. It's here, right? So there's stuff that's going to happen starting next week again. Any other design notes and future features? I like future features. But usually what I do is I don't put anything in there right now, unless you know for a fact that there's going to be stuff that you thought about that's out of scope. Like I thought about some stuff that I really like to see, but it's out of scope. So let's put it in here in future features. An example of that is I'm working on a game right now, which is kind of this idea of mechs versus kaiju, right? Like Pacific Rim kind of idea with some other guys, right? And we were thinking about this a lot. We want to try and make up the models, and this is a 3D game. We're making some models up, right? But you know, the other team says, I don't know if we can make kaiju models, right? Kaiju models are hard, right? It's not like, a mech. A mech is like, it's you can model a mech in Blender or something else, but a kaiju with a whole armature and everything else, that's really tough. It could be really tough to make it look good. So we're like, maybe that's out of scope right now. That might be one of our future features, right? By the way, we're thinking about calling it Mad Mechs. I don't know. We'll see how it goes, as in Mad Max. But anyways, we'll see how it goes. So just, those kind of things are things that we're kind of working on right now. And then you'll be working on a game when you do stuff, and you'll sit there and go, yeah, guys, we can't do this. This is totally out of scope. We can't get this done in the time that we have. So let's put it down here as a future feature if we have time. All right, so any questions around the game pitch? Again, it's due next week. And your first draft of your game design document, which is also due next week. This is stuff that you and your team have to meet together today. I'll give you some time today to do it, as well as outside of this class. Remember, you have some of you have people who handed in their contract, right? That contract is with 5% of your final grade. If you haven't handed it in, talk to me after this. We're going to take a short break, right? Because you need to hand it in. You know, you have to kind of put in there when you're meeting, right? Outside of this class. Maybe it's Thursdays from 10 to 2 as an example, or some other kind of time, right? Whenever you decide to meet, you're going to meet and you're going to put this stuff together. Your producer should be responsible for putting this documentation together with you, right? So whoever your producer is, he or she has got to look, you know, kind of get you guys together to put this stuff in. It's his responsibility or her responsibility. So if your producer doesn't produce this, and by the way, people who didn't hand in their crap last week, right? The producers are on the hook for it, not me, right? So whoever your producer is and your stuff is not handed in, your contract for last week, that producer is going to lose a mark, guaranteed, if they're not in for, so they're losing a full %. I'm telling you right now, off their final grade, okay? Because it's not in. You guys didn't hand it in. That means the rest of the team is on the hook for the producer's, in my opinion, failure, right? A producer role is one of the hardest roles because A, you have no power, right? We talked about this. Inside the classroom, you're still a student, but somehow you're trying to get people to be motivated, right? And remember, we have these roles we kind of indicated, right? Software engineer, producer. That's the responsible. Look, all documentation, including the game design document, presentation, and files, and other. That's the first thing, man. Producers, you know, has to get this done. So if you guys haven't handed that in, I'm not going to go to the other team for this one. It's not their failure. It's the producer's failure in this particular case, right? You haven't handed it in, you come to me at break, and we'll go and talk about it, right? So that's it for me for this first part, the pitch and your game design document, right? Let's take, like we're sitting at 9:30. I've talked for about an hour, right? Again, let's take a 10-minute break. When we come back, please bring some coffee and that kind of stuff for yourself. Go out and grab some stuff if you need to. Take a break, go to the washroom, whatever. And then we get back. I'm going to start with Unity right away. And I'm going to go into details about how to make our first space shooter, all right? It's not going to be the space shooter template that we got from Unity. That's not what I'm going to be using. I'm going to be building it from scratch. And we're going to be coding it from scratch from the very beginning, okay? Any questions? Yeah. Yeah.
What I got is you need to work on it and put what we have in mind. After that, you give us feedback and we just modify it for the second version.
The second version will be 2 weeks afterwards, and you'll also have some more idea because as you go forward, you're going to know how to build stuff in Unity. Some of you have never touched Unity before. Some of you have already had some Unity experience because you've taken Wallace's COMP391 class, right? So you have a little bit of interface, how to do the interface with Unity. So you'll know more in your second version. Your second version should be tighter because there's going to be another attempt to kind of put your stuff together, and you're going to get feedback from your pitch presentation, right? Because all of us here are going to give feedback to everyone who comes up here, and you're going to take some of that feedback in mind and maybe tighten up your game design document.
Well, because we have lots of features in our mind, but we're not sure if we can do it or not.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You need to meet with your team and kind of sit there and go, which parts can we possibly do, right? And I can guide you as well. If you have any questions around, should I do this game, whatever, you can talk to me about it today, and I'll tell you. I'll say, yeah, it's out of scope, or okay, that's a little bit, that's really, the scope is too little. Like you're not really capturing everything you need, right? Both things are bad, right? If the scope is too small, like it's a really small game for 3 people, only 1 person can do this game, you know, whatever. Or if it's really massive, the scope is like, you know, you combine with 6 players to make a platformer, but it's like so massive, the scope, you can't even do it with 10 people. To me, it's like, you know, we got to cut that back. So talk to me at break if you have a problem with that, I think is the answer, right? If you're worried, right? And the other question is everyone's team here? Is anyone's team not here? How about that? All right, that's a problem. Remember, I told you guys, if you guys don't attend, and if you guys are separate or people in the team aren't here every single week that we're here, that's going to be presenting a problem for you guys when it comes to output. I'm not saying that mandatory is attendance necessary, or sorry, let me go back. My mind is Saturday morning. Attendance is mandatory. I said it backwards, right? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that, you know, either if someone's not here, there's got to be a really good reason why, because you guys are a team. This is a good opportunity for you guys to work together, right? In this class, right? So it'd be crazy not to have to take advantage of this, right? I know that you have other courses, but, you know, there shouldn't be any other courses happening today other than mine, right? So chances are. Okay, is that answer your question? So you mean we need to focus on your stuff, and I can try and help you with your scope.
And the last question, some items like camera, you just mentioned that it's obvious what type of camera we
So don't put it in. That's what I said. So if it's obvious, like, I mean, if the camera, you're doing a 2D game, you know, I told you, camera doesn't have to be in. You can take it out.
We have to delete this from our
Yes, it's a template. So your document's a template. It's not every section is required. So your game design document, you can modify and put only the sections that make sense to you. There's certain sections, obviously, that I'd want to see. And if if something's missing, then I'll give you feedback in your game design document, the one you hand in, and I'll say, yeah, no, you're missing these things, right? And then you'll include that in your second version. Yeah. Which file? This one here, or the one you're going to hand in? The GDD, to me, it could be a PDF or Word document. Your game pitch document, you should also hand in next week. I'll give you the details. When I put up the assignment officially, right, you'll see the details in the assignment, what I want you to hand in. But your GDD should have your either PDF or Word. I'm okay with that. Your game pitch should be a presentation. So somehow in PowerPoint, slide deck, something from something like that. I want to have that in there, as well as you need to actually do your presentation, right? Those are the three things you need to do next week. Yeah. Are you good? All right, let's take a short break, like I said, and we come back in 10 minutes or so. We'll continue with Unity. Please see me if you haven't handed in your contract, because it's closed, right?